41's coming, and that's kind of how we've approached this series, is just 41's coming. And on the other side of the heart, other side of the 40, other side of the significant 40s that we see in the Bible, that 41 is coming. And so we've been kind of working from this one verse, and it's John 16:33, and it should be up. We may be having some technical difficulties, but if not, but we're going to read two verses today. We're going to read this verse and one other verse here in a few minutes, and that's the only two verses we're going to do today. And I just want to sit in them a little bit. And honestly, I think that based on this series and based on what we're going through today, if you're kind of living in a space that today is the tension, the struggle for you, I think these verses bring a ton of peace, a ton of comfort, and a ton of just help in your journey. And so memorizing these and sitting in them are going to be great. This first one is this. It's been our theme verse for this whole series. And it says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. You know, Jesus sitting with his disciples, they shared with them the struggle that he knew was coming. And knew that there was going to come a time that he wasn't going to be sitting with them, that he wasn't going to be in that space. He knew what was ahead. They, of course, did not. And he's just saying, in this world, I have trouble. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. And like I mentioned, we've been working through this series through significant 40s. Week 1, we talked about the story of David and Goliath. And Goliath would come out twice a day for 40 days, taunting the Philistine giant, taunting the Israelites. And just saying, you know, let's just send your giant, send your best warrior down. We'll do this mano a mano, one person. Whoever wins, the other army will be the servant to that. For 40 days, the Israelite army hid. They just would not step up. They weren't brave enough. They didn't trust God to step in to be on their behalf. And then David, a tiny little teenager, shows up. And he walks out trusting, believing in God. And there's a lot more to that story, but which, you know, a lot of us know, and we heard it inside of you know, children's church and things growing up, and we've heard this story forever. But David comes in, and because of his faith and his trust in God, he walks in, he slays the giant. And the Israelites are victorious. And so 40 days, day and night, they were taunted, and then 41 came, and David was there. The second week, we talked about how Israel, you know, a few chapters earlier, still Israel, and the nation had kind of been in captivity, and they had come up to a place where they were at the edge of the promised land. Now, I need to actually say something to you guys here. Like, I messed up last week, and I said something that wasn't right, and a friend of mine pointed it out. I said that, like, you know, they'd been in captivity, then Moses wandered, then they had wandered the desert, and then they got here, and then they did another 40 years. I made Moses 160 years old, and I'm afraid if I don't correct it, and I give him another 40 years with the whining Israelites, he's going to slap me when we see each other in heaven. So Moses only lived to be 120, so he didn't do 2 terms of wandering in the desert, and that is my fault. I just got to storytelling, and I messed that up, and so I wanted to correct that. So, you know, the Israelites were in captivity. Moses killed a man. He went, you know, pulled a diva moment, went and hid in the woods and didn't help anybody do anything. Then he comes back. They escape. They leave. And then they get here to the promised land. And they're standing at the edge of the promised land. They send 12 spies into the land. And when they come back, when those 12 spies come back, 10 of them are going, this land is terrible. There's huge giants. God has brought us here to kill us. They're going, we'd be better off be back in Egypt. And 2 of the spies were saying, we've got to do this. They were in the land for 40 days as the spies. And then God looks at them and just basically says, because of your unfaithfulness, anyone who's basically 20 or older is going to die in the wilderness, in the desert. And so you're going to wander. And he sends them for 40 years, a year for every day that the spies were in the land. And anyone who was old enough to go to battle, anyone who was old enough to know better, basically, was not allowed to enter into the promised land. But 41 came for a generation. Year 41, that first day came in year 41. And a generation got to step into the promised land because God is faithful. Week 3, we talked about Acts chapter 1, and Jesus spent 40 days with his disciples after he died. After he rose again, he was dead, buried, rose again. He spent 40 days with the disciples, journeying with them. He could have done anything when he came back, when he sat in that moment, when he sat in that space, he could have done anything. But he chose to sit in circles with his disciples because he knew there was coming a time. He knew there was coming a moment. He knew there was going to be a day that 41 was coming. And we've talked about this in these weeks. It's great when you know that someone is present. It's nice to be able to call somebody. It's nice to kind of have that feeling that they're there. There's a big difference, though, when that person can wrap their arms around you, when they can reach out and say things to you, when they can kind of right there in that presence and you can look across and you can say something and they can speak back. That makes a difference. And Jesus knew there was coming a time that the disciples wouldn't be able to do that. And so he sat with them. He sat in circles, and he spent time. And then last week, we looked at the temptation of Jesus. And after him fasting for 40 days, he was led into the wilderness where he was tempted by Satan. And as he journeyed through this, we got to see this struggle, and we see Jesus kind of taking Scripture and navigating through this space and him walking through God's Word. And the thing that we got to understand that is Satan would tempt, Jesus would use God's word, and Satan would tempt. And we talked about this from the idea of we love the fact of Jesus as deity. We love Jesus as God. We love Jesus as if he's God, he can handle all these things. And it makes us feel a little bit better. Because when we think about it, if we face a struggle and it's like, oh, I didn't quite get through that. When we face temptation, when we face a struggle that's kind of sitting on us and we fail, we sin, we come up short, we go, well, Jesus is God. And that makes us feel better. And it makes us feel like it's unattainable and so, well, it's just what it is. But the reality is this, is Jesus, when he came to earth, was fully man. He gave up every right to his deity. And so when he stood in the desert, and when he stood in the wilderness, and he was tempted by the devil, he withstood that, trusting his Father, having faith, leaning into Scripture, leaning into truth, quoting Deuteronomy as he was moving through that. When he faced the punishment that he did for the cross, he did that as fully human. And as hard as that is for us to take, because see, I want that moment. I want him to be fully God. Because I don't want to think about it. I mean, I know how much I hurt just getting up and trying to get my knees moving some days. And I don't want to have to think about the fact of that Jesus went through the full pain of what he did and how he sat in that space. But he told us, in this world, you'll have trouble. He knew that we were going to face situations. He knew we were going to have moments of wandering in the wilderness. He knew we were going to have Goliaths, the things that kind of face up, that we kind of bump into. He knew there were going to be some spaces in time where people that had meant something to us weren't going to be there, and that things were going to be hard, and we were going to lose things that were important to us. And he knew that Satan and his demons were going to come after and try to confuse and to get us to move away and to not trust and not follow God. In this world, you'll have trouble. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. And so here's the question I've got today as we close this series out. It's great when you can look at these stories and you see 41. And you're going, oh, they went through 40 years, but 41 came. 40 years is a long time, but they at least got to 41. 40 days seems like a long time too. But 41 came, and they got to this redemption. They got to this story. They got to this moment where everything just kind of sat fresh, and they were able to start anew. And the thing they had yearned for, the thing they had longed for, the promised land, the slayed giant, overcoming the temptation, all of those things were past. And they were able to rejoice on the other side of 40 in 41. And y'all are going, that's awesome. And I love that for those people. At least we say that on the outside. But if you're still sitting in your 40, or as Gary said a couple weeks ago, if your 40 feels like it's turned into 80, or you're like me, add another 40 years to Moses' life when you're going, man, it's been hard enough, 120 years, and now you're trying to make me 160. And I mean, you're going, Robert, it's just not ending. 40's been 80, 80's been 160. I just feel like every day I'm hitting the wall. I just feel like that it is never going to come. I feel like there's just this space in this moment where I just don't have the ability to go on because I'm not seeing any hope on the other side. I want to tell you, I've been there. I've sat where you are. Honestly, there's days where I feel like that it's just things just don't click, and you go, man, am I back in a spiral? And it's easy to get our minds distracted. It's easy to let the things that are going on, whether self-inflicted, let's just be honest. A lot of times the trials we end up in, look at the nation of Israel. If they'd have just remembered, if they'd have just believed, if they'd have just trusted that God was faithful, if they could have looked back and seen what he was done, they could have stepped in. And I'm in that same boat. If I could just look back and remember and see. But we get into these spaces, whether it's self-inflicted or someone else hurts us. Something happens that we end up in this spiral. How do we kind of get out of it? And I just want to kind of mention 5 things today. These aren't super profound. There's something that we all can do. And I told you all I was reading a book called 41 Will Come to kind of navigate some of this. And these come out of the last chapter in that book. I've really enjoyed it. If it's something like, if you like to read, maybe you can get it on, through the library or something, or if you like to buy them, it's not crazy expensive on Amazon. But here, I'm going to walk through these 5 things for you. First, keep praying. I think a lot of times when we step into the struggles and the things that we face, we just wake up every day and we go, I'm going to do it. I'm going to walk in. I'm going to grab the bull by the horn. I'm back this. I'm going to do this thing. And we point where we're really hurt or we're really down, and then we're going, maybe I need God. And it's not in the moment that we even start praying a lot of times. It's actually a little bit later, and we're going, okay, I probably asked God, but we're embarrassed. We're scared. What if God answers in a way that I don't like? What if God gives a response that I don't care for? And I think I quoted this a couple weeks ago. A.W. Tozer is one that I think gets kind of, a lot of people say this, but I was reading his quote, that a lot of times we don't ask, we don't pray for God to give us an answer because we already know we're not going to do what he says. And we sit in these spaces, these moments where we're scared to pray because we're nervous what the answer might be, or we're embarrassed that we've waited so long to get to that point. But the greatest thing that we can do, the greatest weapon we have in that moment, is to humble ourselves before the Father, to admit, confess, to be transparent about where it is. It's not like he's unaware. And when we talked about prayer back in our spiritual discipline series at the beginning of the year, we really connected prayer and fasting together. And fasting is such an underused tool in our belt. It is really, prayer and fasting aren't disconnected. They aren't two separate things that sometimes we pray and sometimes we fast, and maybe we connect them occasionally. They are really something. And I've said this, I said this back then, I'm not a doctor, I didn't stay at Holiday Inn Express last night. There is nothing about me that has any ability to tell you what to do health-wise with fasting. But like, if you can't fast for a whole day for a medical reason or something, or if you really need to do those types of things, I'm not telling you to go do something and put yourself physically at risk. But, you could skip a snack. That would probably be okay. I mean, most of us eat 8, 12, 14 times a day, and I would cut it to 13. I mean, I think you could fast through one snack, and you would make it. It would be okay. But I think in those moments, in those spaces, we've got to keep praying. We've got to keep looking to Jesus. We've got to keep looking to God the Father. We've got to keep listening to the Holy Spirit. Because I believe that 41 is coming. And I have to believe that. I think Scripture teaches that. I think we've looked at that for 4 solid weeks. New Testament and Old Testament. That 41 is coming, and I know it's complicated right now, but we've got to keep praying. Secondly is keep listening. This is kind of the combination of that A.W. Tozer quote. Like when we pray, when we really pray, when we sit and we're fasting, and we're praying and we're listening and we're communicating to God and we're sharing these words, there comes a moment that you have to listen. I very much like to finish conversations before they are done. And I am terrible at that with my wife. She will start to talk and be like, yeah, I know this, and this. And she's like, no, that is not at all what I was intending to say, how I wanted to finish that. If you will just let me finish. Basically, Robert, if you will just listen. And that's how I want to live life. That's how I want to follow. That's how I do at home. I'll finish my boys' sentences. I'll finish my mom's sentences. I'll finish Melissa's sentences. If we knew each other well enough, I'll start finishing yours. Ask Gary. We have coffee. I finish his sentences all the time. Yeah, I get it. We're here. And he's like, no, that's not at all where we are. And it's just something where when your brain's moving super fast and you're always thinking, you're going, hey, I've got an answer. And it's like sometimes like you don't, if you had an answer, you would be doing something. We're praying and asking for hope because we don't know what's next. To get that next step, we've got to listen. So keep praying, keep listening, keep waiting is the third thing. I know how hard this is. I understand the complication that comes with it. Because we do not live in a world where waiting is valued. We talked about several weeks ago, we even had a Tom Petty song. He's saying in the beginning that waiting's the hardest part. Waiting from anyone. We get out of circles. We get out of community. We go into hibernation. And we get to a place that we just don't move and engage. We've got to stay in the rhythm and the flow of our life. We've got to stay into the space where we're engaging with people who love Jesus, where we're engaging with people who care about us, that we're engaging and moving in these spaces. That God can give us, He can speak through the people that are in that moment, or at a bare minimum, they can encourage us. And the last thing is this: keep remembering. I love the song that we sang earlier. It just said, now these stones in the wilderness tell the story of His faithfulness. So many times, if we were just willing to look back, if we were just willing to remember the other times that we have sat in moments that are like where we are right now. And here's the thing. My assumption is not that every person in the room is in the middle of a 40. My assumption is not that every person in here is struggling through something right now. But just based on statistics and numbers, I would say there's at least one person. At least one. So this might just be a good thought for some of us to write down, to keep in our brain, to keep these 5 things aware, to keep them ahead. Maybe if we keep these things rolling, maybe we don't hit that struggle and that tension the same way as much. But if you're sitting in here today, we talked about with the Israelites how God provided them, manna. And Jesus even referenced that in when He was being tempted. That God provided manna, something fresh, something new. And it wasn't till just moments later that they were complaining that He was providing food and they didn't like the food. And then it was later, it's just like, I can't remember. I like this, just like I'm frustrated about this. You just brought us here to die. You haven't done anything for us. And we tend to forget how much God has done for us and how much He loves us. my wife and I have 3 boys, and I love them, and we are pretty competitive, and that is a lot on me. Like the fact that I told a group of people who were probably visiting for the first time that I don't care if your football team lost, if you're playing my team, is probably not the kindest thing, and may show a small level of the competitiveness that can kind of come through my life. But we can get really competitive about anything, and I don't care if that's playing board games, if that's playing wiffle ball in the front yard, watching Netflix. We can get really competitive about who watched TV better and how that goes. And so we can get really intense about some things. And a few months ago, we were in the front yard playing wiffle ball, and it was my first time playing with the boys this year because I can't stay healthy right now at this phase of my life. And so I had come out of the boot, and I was back out there, and I was ready to go, and we were playing a little bit, and the boys, like, I've got one son. I'm not going to say anybody's name, so I'm not going to embarrass them. If they want to tell you later, you can follow them on social media, and they can tell you, hey, I'm the one who did this. But I'm going to do my best not to say a name, but I've got one son who thinks he's like Nolan Ryan, Greg Maddux combined somehow, and he thinks he's the greatest pitcher on the face of the earth. And so we get out here, and we're starting to play, and they forget at times I had a life before them. Like there was an entire portion of my life that since like 3 years old that I have played sports, and I have played tons of sports. I mean, I've even poorly played street hockey. I mean, with blades and pads and gotten out there, and I mean, I'm not good, but I poorly played it. I mean, I've played cricket. I've done all kinds of random crazy stuff that I absolutely love. I just like sports, and that's my idea of fun. I enjoy that type of thing. And so we got out there, and this one was throwing these pitches, and like again, we have a strike zone. Like you can't just go up there and stand. And so like I smoke one, like one of the first ones that come up. I mean, I just turn on it and smoke it, and I about hit Melissa. And that is not what this story is about. That is a different sermon illustration about fear of my life and dying if I ever hit her with a ball again. But that space in that moment, we sat there, and so I hit for a few minutes, and I didn't hit any crazy home runs or anything, but I consistently like put the ball and like hit the ball hard, and that's how I played baseball. I was a base hitter. That's what I did. So I hit the ball hard, and then they were like, "Oh, well, you can't pitch," and I was like, "Let's go." So I go out there and I get on the mound, and I start to pitch, and I pitched to all 3 of the boys and basically handled them all the same way. But one in particular, I had pitched. Now, I need to preface with this. I had embarrassingly struck him out twice. I'm talking like he's like flailing, like doesn't know whether to swing or not to swing. Like, I love that you all are looking, trying to see where the facial reactions are coming from. So like I'm talking embarrassingly struck him out. And then I leave one hanging in the third out. I leave one hanging, and all I get is a big bat flip and walking around bases. And like to this day, 2 months later, we'll be sitting around not even talking about this. We'll be talking about planting a garden, and he's like, "Remember that time I was planting a 400-yard nuke off you in the front yard, and you're terrible, and I'm the greatest, and this is this." And he's walking around and, like I said, bat flips and just, woohoo, get you some of that kind of thing, and all of this stuff. And I might have deserved that. I might have absolutely deserved every ounce of all of that I got, because I have delivered that same level of smack talk to my kids many times over. I've never really been the dad that lets my kids win. I mean, they have had to earn it, and so I don't destroy them in checkers when they were little, but I'm not going to just let them win. They're going to have to figure it out. So, but we're very competitive. We have a lot of fun. And stuff, but the thing about it is I deserved what I got there, but it is never fun. Never fun when somebody gets to throw the bat at you, or somebody's talking smack, or somebody is bringing that level of disrespect and hurt to you. And the thing that's even worse is when the enemy starts to remind you of those moments. Remember that one time? And you're like not even thinking about it. And you're sitting here and this random thought comes up. And it comes in. And the enemy just destroys and tears you down. and you're going, and it's just this constant reminder of being 41 didn't come, God's not listening, you're finished. And I just want you to see this verse. It's an Old Testament verse from Micah 7:8. Micah 6:8 is one of my favorite verses. It said, as I learned it kind of in the King James, He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. And then one chapter later, He says this: do not gloat over me, my enemy. Though I have fallen, I will rise. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light. Now, a third of this book of Micah kind of targets, Micah's talking like the sins of the people, and another looks at the punishment of God to come. But then there's this last third, this last part of the book that's a promise, is hope for the faithful after the judgment. See, Micah's writing kind of to Judah and Israel in this space, and the Assyrians, and during his time of writing, the Assyrians are going to come in and they're going to take over. As once again, there's going to be a loss. The enemy is coming. There is this moment in time, and what God is saying through Micah is He's like, I want you to remember this. When the enemy's gloating, when the enemy's standing over top of you, when he's telling you that 41's not going to come, when he's telling you that you're not worthy, that God doesn't love you, that He doesn't care enough, that the situation you're in is exactly what you deserve, that God is never going to reach in and help, He's never going to give you a next step, He's never going to do. He's saying, don't gloat over me. Though I've fallen, I will rise. And I love how he finishes. Though I sit in the darkness. Isn't that what we do? We hide. How do I stay away? How do I move out? How do I not be seen? Everyone must know. Everyone's got to be aware of this struggle. Everyone's got to know that what I'm going through. Everyone sees me, and it's either pity or it's anger or it's this or that or whatever. We just hide in the darkness. But though I sit in the darkness, the Lord will be my light. As the band's coming back up, I just want to say a couple of things here as we finish. Micah's talking really specifically to the sin and the struggle that the Assyrians and Judah and Israel are facing in this space, in this moment. And he's looking at them and he's going, look, here's the situation that you're in. Here's the struggle. Here's the tension. Here's the things. But he's reminding them that the only power Satan has over them is what they're giving him. That though they've fallen, that through the blood of Christ, and I understand that in that moment they didn't understand all of that, and there was still some time to come, that through the blood of Christ we will rise. And though we sit in darkness, even though we feel hopeless, even though we feel like there is no tomorrow, God will be our light. I love the verse in Proverbs that just says that His word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. And we see that light, and I've said this before, we see light so much now because it's so easy to get access to, 100,000 lumen lights that'll light an entire field, and that's how we want God to show us our future, how we want Him to show us these things. Back then, you've got to remember, they were carrying small lanterns. And His word was a lamp to their feet, the next step, showing them the next step in the path. Some of us are wanting God to show us 10,000 steps down the road before we become willing to be obedient to take the next one. And that's not what this is. It's small steps of obedience every day that God turns into so much for His glory, for His good. Because the beauty of the stories we've covered in this series is not the fact that we have Goliaths or things like that. Those stories aren't about us. Really, none of the stories are. They're about how big God is, about His goodness, and how He always comes through. And even from a generation of people from Israel that I think we reflect a lot in, from Israelites that continually forgot and stepped away and didn't lean in to who God, what He had done for them. He continually showed hope and opportunity for them. Because of this, and we're about to sing this, because fear is not our future. He is. Sickness is not our story. Heartbreak's not our home. And death is not the end. He is. So as we sing these words in a moment and we echo this truth out, I just want you to think about the fact of that in this world you will have trouble. But take heart, for I have overcome the world. And if you're sitting in a space, remember what Micah said. Don't speak to me like that, enemy. Because I will rise. And even though I sit in the darkness, God will be my light. Let me pray. God, thank you. Thank you.